So sometimes when I maybe am bored with having the same type of worship over and over, I will look for new ways that I can kind of explore a relationship with God. So what I did to kind of change things up a bit was create a collage, and then I reflected on how it could relate to something that I studied recently in my devotional. So the story that showed me that Jesus was a feminist was actually the woman caught in adultery. And this is just my interpretation, and this is what I learned based on the reading and on the art that I ended up creating. So, you know the story of the woman caught in adultery. She was, brought to Jesus when Jesus was in around the temple and he was teaching to the crowd. And of course, the Pharisees, who are always trying to catch Jesus in a hard place, they brought this woman to her while he was teaching and said, hey, like, this woman was caught in adultery, and the Mosaic law says that someone who's caught in adultery should be stoned. So what are we going to do? So Jesus doesn't say anything. He doesn't acknowledge it right away. He just stops teaching and he starts to write in the ground. And then the crowd just keeps on asking him, like, hey, what are we going to do? They're pressing him, like, what are we going to do? Demanding an answer. And then Jesus stops writing and he stands up and he says, if any of you have no sin, then you cast the first stone. Eventually, it's not really specified what was written, but it's believed that Jesus was writing the sins of the crowd, people in the crowd on the ground, because after he said that and after they looked at what he did, the crowd just dispersed one by one. So now we get to the part where I think Jesus was a feminist. So first, I'm just going to relate this story to the collage that ties in with feminism. Each piece of the collage symbolizes an event that happened in the story. So first, you can see the hands that are kind of pointed outwards, or kind of pointed like halfway pointed outwards like that. When I did that, I thought, oh, that is going to represent how in this situation the Pharisees, they're pointing at this woman, right? They're saying, oh, what is she doing? She's doing this horrible thing. And it made me think of how my dad used to tell me when me and my siblings would blame him for something or point at him and be like, oh, you did this. Then he would say, remember, whenever you point your fingers at somebody, there's always 3 fingers pointing back at you. So in this picture, or in this collage, I see that the finger pointing outwards represents the Pharisees accusing the woman, and the fingers pointing back is Jesus kind of saying, like, hey, like, look what you did though, like, it's not all her. So that's one thing. The second thing that I have is strings that are coming, or I don't know what it was supposed to be in that cut in that magazine picture, but it looks like there's some strings that are coming down from the hand that are yellow and blue. And so I thought that that could represent how Jesus' love and mercy was just flowing from him in that situation. The cross and the candle represent how Jesus was a light and how he served the earth and was passionate about his ministry in reaching people before he got to the cross, before he was crucified. And then we have at the bottom is a small found poem that I did, and it says, when she speaks, you experience God's faithfulness, or you're experiencing God's faithfulness. And I put that there because I imagine that after she had this encounter with Jesus, she experienced his faithfulness and went on to tell others about her experience. The devotional that I was reading, that the Pharisees were trying to catch Jesus in a really hard place. And they were trying to catch him in 2 ways. If he would have went against the Mosaic law and said, oh, no, we're not going to stone her, then, well, it would have been going against the Mosaic law and what the Pharisees stand for. So they could have made a huge case against him and said, oh, he went against Mosaic law. If you would have said, yeah, let's stone this woman, which the devotional says that Romans were the only people who are able to give capital punishment for a crime. So if he were to say, okay, let's stone her, then they could have taken him to the court and said, oh, he's guilty of going against Roman law. So by not participating and giving them an answer, he acts very smartly. by not escalating the situation. A lot of times when people think about feminism, they automatically think about radical feminism. First of all, there are many different types of feminism, which many people don't even know. I didn't know myself until I got into undergrad and I took up psychology of women, and I learned that there are different types of feminism. So many people quiver in their boots whenever they hear the word feminism, because it's my belief that most people think of this radical feminism that's represented a lot in the media. So this can be images of women just saying like, destroy the patriarchy, men suck, all that type of language is not always what radical feminism is about, but a lot of times that's the form of radical feminism is represented in that way in the media. But ultimately, what feminism is simply just wanting equal rights for women and wanting them to have the same treatment as a man would. And so in this situation, Jesus is acting as a feminist because although the Mosaic law does say, yeah, a woman should be stoned, in Deuteronomy and Leviticus, the law says that the man and the woman should be stoned. Not just the woman. It says both parties who are involved should be stoned. So when Jesus reacts in this way, and he is basically saying, hey, look, we're not going to do this, he's sending the message that both parties need to be held accountable, and both people need to be held accountable for their actions. At the end of the story, Jesus also says that he does not condemn this woman. This is really important because at this time, I'm sure that she was facing a lot of shame and a lot of just feeling horrible and embarrassed about this situation. But by Jesus stepping in and saying, I don't condemn you, but also not just saying, I don't condemn you, he's also pointed out to others, hey, you guys have sinned too. It's not just this woman's fault. He is doing something that is monumental in the course of history during his time, because during that time, a lot of times it's easy, even now, women are so often blamed for actions or behaviors that take place in society. If a woman is sexually assaulted, it's almost always turned into victim shaming. What was she wearing? What was she doing? Was she drunk? Or I've even heard of situations where if a mother raised a child and maybe they ended up in bad behavior, in delinquency, in jail, a lot of times I hear the top critique that I hear is, what was their mother doing? They must have had a horrible mother. And a lot of times it's not even thought of that it took two parents to make the child, so it takes two parents to raise them. So by Jesus saying, hey, I don't condemn you, go and sin no more, he's offering her liberation and he's empowering her to go and live your life. Yeah, you made a mistake. They made mistakes too. Nobody is perfect. You don't have to have shame about what you've done. Just go and live your life differently and freed. That is how Jesus is a feminist. He's using his power, his male privilege, his power as a man in society, his power as an influential person to not just argue about women's rights, to talk about women's rights, but he's using it to step up and block this act of hatred, this act of violence toward this woman. Even though he didn't necessarily get into an argument with the Pharisees, he might have not said all of that, his actions said it all. So I just wanted to make this video because sometimes people have representations of the Bible that they think aren't relevant to today, or that many times people also use the Bible to promote ideas that are very oppressive to women or that are just not really good with empowering women. I hope this video was a blessing to you, and I hope it provided some type of new insight. Let me know what you think in the comments. Be blessed and stay amplified.